And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Friday. Hey, it's Friday, and today we have so much to talk about. Well, it's a beautiful day out here in Brisbane, and it's 17 degrees and it's sunny. So this is a live stream coming to you all the way from Brisbane, Australian Indian Radio's daily Facebook Live update, brought to you by Chentex Multimedia Services. And today we have so much to talk about, but first of all, let's take a look at what else is happening right here. And of course, right now, the talk of the town is AstraZeneca. And of course, there have been talks about that it is going to be very hard for people, 60 and above, because there have been lots of things happening, especially with those complications with the blood clots. But, when we look at Australia, they say it's very rare that cases are going to be happening. But of course, one of the breaking news that we have today is about the travel declaration for Queensland. And what it means is that anyone travelling to Queensland from 1 a.m. on Saturday, 19th June, must complete a Queensland travel declaration before entering the state. New cases of COVID-19 are emerging in New South Wales and Victoria. And of course, this is a sensible measure to keep Queenslanders safe. So residents of border communities will be exempt in line with other jurisdictions, which will remain in place. So we will maintain the restrictions on travel for Greater Melbourne for another 7 days. And this is a recommendation from Queensland government. And of course, they are saying that for the next 7 days, they will keep this travel restriction in place. And we will keep an eye on how things are going. So, of course, as we know that the travel declaration, which has come in force now, and it will remain in force for the next 7 days. And it is highly recommended that the restrictions be followed. Well, right now, let's move on and take a look at some of the news that's breaking. One is that AstraZeneca that we saw, and here's that report.
No sign of vaccine hesitancy in the queue for this clinic.
I've had the AstraZeneca one. No problems.
My mum got it and she's fine.
They all know what's at stake.
The sooner everybody gets it, the sooner we can get out of this.
The vaccination is always a good thing.
But still there are concerns lingering reluctance will become infectious.
The most important thing for us to do is, if we do have the medical advice, to follow it.
A Commonwealth expert advisory group recommending further restriction of the AstraZeneca vaccine, following a dozen new cases of blood clotting associated with the particular COVID jab.
7 of those have been between the age of 50 and 59.
All up, there have been 60 cases of rare blood clotting from 3.8 million AstraZeneca shots administered in Australia. The majority have been released from hospital. 2 women have died. Pfizer, now the recommended vaccine for under 60s.
We're doing so this time on the basis of a highly precautionary approach.
The new advice affects 2.1 million Australians aged 50 to 59 who are yet to be vaccinated. They'll become immediately eligible for the Pfizer jab. The 815,000 people in that age group who've already had one AstraZeneca shot are strongly encouraged to stick with it.
Anyone who has had a first dose of AstraZeneca without problem should feel very confident to have their second dose.
Millions of Australians under 60 now reliant on imports of the Pfizer vaccine rather than the locally made AstraZeneca shot, which was meant to be the backbone of the rollout.
The Prime Minister bet the house on AstraZeneca, and now this rollout is in complete disarray.
Every vaccine that we have purchased, we have secured at the earliest possible time.
Enough, we're told, to keep the rollout on track.
I am confident that we will still meet the primary aim of giving every Australian who wants a vaccine access to a vaccine by the end of this year.
Today's decision is yet another blow to what's been a troubled rollout. It'll stretch Pfizer supplies in the short term and may encourage those eligible for AstraZeneca to wait, unless GPs can convince them otherwise. But vaccinating the population will be the only way to inoculate state governments against the temptation to call snap lockdowns in future outbreaks. Andrew Probyn.
And that is the way it is going to be. And for people like me who have already had the first shot, we are waiting for the second dose. And of course, that is AstraZeneca and not the Pfizer ones. So at the moment, Pfizer seems to be the preferred method. But even if we look at those blood clots, it has been told that there's not that many cases or very rare incidences happening right here. So our Chief Medical Officer, Paul Kelly, explains on this advice.
We have had the ATAGI group has been meeting every week, reviewing all of the information that comes through the TGA and other mechanisms about any adverse events related to vaccines. And their advice has been based on the assessment of that new information that was given to them yesterday from the TGA. So that's 12 new cases of this rare but sometimes very serious clotting condition, the TTS syndrome as it's called, in the last week. And 7 of those have been between the age of 50 and 59. So that has changed the rate of that particular issue in that age group to the point where the rate is very similar to the under 50s. And so it's really that's been the key new information that has been that has gone to ATAGI, and they've based that on the risk benefit equation now being the risk outweighing the benefit in that particular age group. In the statement that they've given and will be published shortly, they go through that in some detail about why they've made that decision. They've balanced the risk and benefit of the vaccine in the context where we are right now in Australia in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic, and also with an eye to what might happen over the coming months. And I think that's a really important message. AstraZeneca remains a very effective vaccine. The benefit of AstraZeneca in the over 60s remains much higher than the risk of this particularly rare but sometimes serious syndrome. And so people over 60 should still be rolling up to their GP or wherever they are getting their AstraZeneca vaccine and get that first dose. The second important component of the advice is that anyone who has had a first dose of AstraZeneca without problem should feel very confident to have their second dose, and they should keep that booking. Go and talk to your GP about it if you're concerned, but on the basis of information we have in Australia, we've not had a single case of this particular syndrome in a second dose, but we have not had many second doses in Australia. But in the UK, they've had almost 16 million doses of second doses of AstraZeneca, and the rate of this particular rare but sometimes serious condition is much, much lower, around 1.5 per million, which is way lower than the first dose that's across all age groups.
So the main point there is that it is lower than the other one. And of course, the risks are there. But as the Chief Medical Officer, Paul Kelly, said, that anyone who has had the first dose, it is quite safe to get the second dose done. But I know, of course, as soon as a news breaks out, there is always a bit of panic within the community. So right now, let's look at what Dr. Norman Swan has to say on this same situation.
A week is a long time in this pandemic. Just 7 days ago, we heard of Australia's second death linked to the AstraZeneca vaccine.
A 52-year-old woman has died of a severe clotting condition in the brain after receiving the AstraZeneca vaccine.
I will point out that it's only the second death, with now over 3.6 million doses of this vaccine being given across Australia.
A Sydney woman in her early 50s had suffered a catastrophic stroke. The announcement shook clinicians, 2 of whom told 7:30 on Monday they wanted change.
In Australia now, with such low rates of COVID disease, the death of a previously well 52-year-old woman definitely asks us to reconsider the age threshold for the recommendation for AstraZeneca vaccine. It may be time to consider now that we do offer Pfizer vaccine for the 50 to 59-year-old age group.
Personally, I do have concerns about looking very carefully at needing to move the age up to 60.
Last week, after 3.6 million doses of Astra, there were 48 confirmed and probable cases of the rare blood clotting condition linked to the vaccine. 15 were still in hospital, 1 of whom was in intensive care. And it was becoming clear that severe disease from this clotting syndrome was more common in younger people, including 50 to 59-year-olds. Yet, the head of the Therapeutic Goods Administration doubled down on giving Astra to that age group.
When you look at the frequency of this syndrome, known as TTS, it's still much more common in the under 50s than in the over 50s. And that was one of the factors behind the recommendation to government.
But this afternoon, the Chief Medical Officer announced more cases.
That's 12 new cases of this rare but sometimes very serious clotting condition, the TTS syndrome as it's called, in the last week. And 7 of those have been between the age of 50 and 59.
The recommended age to receive AstraZeneca will now be over 60, after the added cases showed a higher incidence rate of clotting in 50 to 59-year-olds.
Under 50 it's 3.1 per 100,000 doses getting this TTS syndrome, recognising that those younger people are getting the more severe forms of that, the older less. 50 to 59 has jumped up now to 2.7, so it's very similar to that under 50.
So now an extra 2.1 million more Australians will have access to Pfizer.
This month we're expected to receive 1.7 million, and next month that will grow to 2.8 million doses, and that's what will allow us to expand the coverage. We remain on track to receive all of our Pfizer during the course of this year.
We are on track, so we are on track to receive the vaccine, the Pfizer, and of course, people who have already had the first dose of AstraZeneca are recommended to go through and follow through with the second dose there as well. Well, right now, when we look at all of this, so some decisions had to be made. So what was the deciding factor and how was this decision made?
Associate Professor Christopher Blythe is a co-chair of the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation, which advised the government to raise the recommended age for the AstraZeneca vaccine to over 60s. Thanks for your time, Professor.
Thank you.
There have been 2 deaths in Australia from the AstraZeneca vaccine out of 3.8 million doses. That means that your odds of dying from that vaccine, based on the current data, is 0.00005%. Why is ATAGI acting on such a remote probability?
ATAGI is acting on this signal at the moment because it's very important to make sure that we're rolling out vaccines that are safe and effective. Importantly, we are seeing that 60 people have had this rare clotting syndrome over the past 10 weeks in Australia, and importantly, we're very keen to make sure that we have a program that can instil confidence and deliver vaccines safely. You talked about 2 deaths, but importantly, it's significantly more than that. More than deaths to talk about. We've got some people who have had significant medical complications from this, and so that's why we do need to have a program which is balanced, and that's what we're doing today by raising the age to 60.
But it's still only 60 people out of 3.8 million, so isn't there a risk that you're creating anxiety and vaccine hesitancy among people when, even if you took the 60 figure, it's still a very, very, very tiny probability of any dramas?
You're exactly right, Leigh. It is a very rare complication that we're looking at. But importantly, we do need to have people informed about that small risk and, importantly, have our program balanced as a result of that.
There are all sorts of risks that have to be assessed in public health all the time. So say, for example, according to the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre, the risk of death from general anaesthetic is 1 in 200,000. We aren't up in arms about that risk. We simply inform people of the risks of general anaesthetic and then they get on with it. Why is that not being done in this particular case?
So the risk of this complication is of the order of about 3.1 per 100,000 for those under the age of 50 and lower than that for older people. We are finding that the rate of this complication is increasing, particularly in those in the 50 to 59-year-old age group, and that is our concern. So importantly, we do need to have that information available to people so they can make some informed decisions. You're right, vaccination is clearly a really important step during this pandemic, but we're in the lucky position at the moment, given that we have low activity. That's why we have made this recommendation to government to raise the preferential recommendation to 60 so that those under that age group are preferred to get the Pfizer vaccine over the AstraZeneca vaccine.
As you point out.
So there we go. That's the explanation why and how they came about making that decision of readjusting the age ones. Well, right now it's time to take a commercial break and get a message from our sponsors.
GlobeNet Realty. GlobeNet Realty has been the longest established, trusted and respected agency in its trade area. Washa Chandra, Director of GlobeNet Realty, provides honest and ethical service to her customers. If you are thinking of investing in Brisbane real estate market, or if you are seeking professional property management, then you should contact Asha Chandra today on landline 3865 4466 or mobile 0419 775 416. And for further updates, log on to our website www.globenetralty.com.au. GlobeNet Realty is your own local real estate agency. Situated at Shop 52281 Sandgate Road, Boondall. GlobeNet Realty. Real estate is our world.
And real estate is the well, and don't forget that every Wednesday we bring to you the real estate update with Usha Chandra right here on this station. And now the good news is that if you would rather hear about that on our online radio, you can do that as well. So every Friday at the morning show from 7:30, which is the Subha Ka Safar, you can hear that recording on that one. And of course on Friday evening 5 p.m. the drive show will feature that as well. And we'll do the same with the travel updates, which will be on Monday. So Monday morning, Subha Ka Safar will incorporate the travel updates with Tanvi Goyal, and it will be incorporated in the drive show as well. So that's good news, a little bit value-added service to our listeners and viewers. But right now, the second case, we're going to look at the breaking news, which is the shooting in Sydney, and here's what an eyewitness had to say.
So last night I was at home and I was in bed reading, and all of a sudden I heard several shots go off, 3, 4, 5, and I was like, that can't be a gun. And I didn't hear any cars or anything for at least another minute or two, and I thought that I should go outside and look, but yeah, it was pretty wild.
When you came out to look, did you see?
I didn't.
Okay.
And then I heard sirens probably a few minutes later.
You're from America?
Yes.
Gun crime is a lot more prevalent there. I mean, it's the assumption you would make if you heard that in America, that's the gunshots. Did you assume it was gunshots here?
I did, but I didn't think it because I was like, I'm in Australia, it's safe here, there's no guns. But yeah, I did think it was guns, yes.
How does it make you feel learning somebody was killed here last night?
Someone was killed here last night. Wow. That's wild. Knowing I live just a block from here. Yeah, that's crazy.
Did you hear anything in terms of the aftermath, shouting, anything like that at all, or it was just the gunshots and that's kind of it?
No, that was it.
So that's what the eyewitness had to say, and of course that unmistakable Yankee accent, of course, that's there. Well, the police are investigating, so here's the report from the police. Of course, the police investigation will take a time, and of course, we cannot, jump to conclusion while the case is under investigation. But we know about the death of that notorious gang leader and all the cases that have been happening around there. Well, right now it's time to go to some world news. First of all, let's go to US, where Joe Biden and Putin, they meet, but this time in Geneva.
Je vous souhaite la bienvenue.
I welcome you to Geneva, city of peace.
Did someone say peace?
I think it's always better to meet face to face.
US photos.
The media missed the message.
I'm not sure how this is working. One more time.
Once the jostling pack was disposed of, the leaders summited by the tranquil shores of Lake Geneva. 2.5 hours later,
I believe that there was no hostility. On the contrary, our meeting took place in a principled manner.
I did what I came to do.
Stripped bare, he meant finding common ground quickly.
The reason it didn't go longer is when the last time two heads of state have spent over 2 hours in direct conversation across the table, going into excruciating detail.
Neither leaders under any illusions, but further talks have been ordered on safety of their nuclear arsenals and restraint on rampant cyber attacks both countries have been victims of. The agreements are modest. Above all, they warily count personal understanding about each other's red lines and no-go conduct as an achievement.
But it doesn't mean that we should look into each other's souls, eyes, and swear eternal love and friendship.
There's a value to being realistic and put on an optimistic front, an optimistic face.
At best, Geneva might prove that democracy and autocracy sometimes need each other, or at least that they can work together when they have to. As Cold War combinations showed, a bond between White House and Kremlin can count for much. So it now falls to Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin to decide just how much they count on each other. As the adversaries, they remain. Greg.
And of course, that is the superpowers. And wouldn't you like to be a fly on the wall when they had that conversation? 2 hours, according to Joe Biden, that is the speech that they, the conversation that they had. And as he mentioned that, it's not always that you get two heads of states together discussing world peace and security. And so much lies, so much power between the two of them. Well, right now we'll go to our island nation right close to us, Fiji, who is battling to control the outbreak of COVID.
The isolated Pacific nation of Fiji managed to remain COVID-free until 2 months ago, when a breach in hotel quarantine let the virus escape into the community. 5 people have died out of almost 1,300 cases. The government doesn't support a nationwide lockdown. Instead, it's ramping up its vaccine rollout. Dr. James Fong is the Permanent Secretary for Health and Medical Services in the Fijian government. Dr. Fong, would you say that Fiji is on top of this situation or not at the moment?
I would say that we have the capability with the current rate that it's moving to deal with it, in the sense that we have escalated a lot of our support programs. We had 1 year to prepare. We have escalated our ability to test. I guess our only issue is that every time we have, most of our cases have been happening in crowded spaces that are fairly contained.
The Fijian government is determined not to do a nationwide lockdown. Why does it think that would be inappropriate?
We have many communities, especially crowded communities, that were not as easy to police and enforce. And the other point is that a lot of these crowded communities, they suffered from the increased risk of getting the virus, and yet when we put in a mitigation measure, what happened was they suffered the economic downturn or economic consequences more than everybody else. So the group that is most vulnerable are also most vulnerable to the negative aspects of any containment or restricted movement episode. So it became unfair on both ends. So we had to try and navigate somewhere in between. How's your vaccination program going? We've had more than 250,000 people have had at least one dose, and that's around 42% of the population have had one dose. We have, I think, for the second dose is still fairly low, about 2 to 3% of the population.
Still, 42% with one dose is quite a lot better than Australia, for example.
Our ability to deploy is not a problem. When we activate, the maximum we've activated so far, we've been able to get 70,000 injections in a week.
And you use the AstraZeneca vaccine mostly, right?
Yes, we are.
And have you seen any deaths from blood clots relating to the vaccine?
We've investigated a few issues that were thought that thought could be linked to such an adverse event, but we've proven them not to have been linked to any, to the vaccine itself. Like with most countries in the world, we've had people who suffered a heart attack after the vaccine, and when you look back at their profile, they were particularly vulnerable to that episode anyway. So we've had a lot of adverse effects that are incidental to the vaccine, but nothing that we can, nothing serious that is due to the vaccine.
Dr. Fong, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Fong, originally from Bar Fiji, he's the Chief Medical Officer in Fiji and reporting on that. And of course, the island nation has been struggling to try and contain, because if you look at the way of life and the way people live there, it is again very, very difficult to go into a lockdown and monitor. And most of these, some of the outbreaks have been resulted or linked to a funeral where many people, just disregarded any sort of notice, and everyone went and attended the funeral, and few other cases like that. And of course, there have been all these talks about where and how it originally came from, being, introduced to Fiji, as they say. Well, right now, moving on, let's take a look at a message from Councillor Angela Awan, as she is supporting GoPio Queensland's India Day Fair, which will be held on the 15th of August this year. And this year it is going to be at the South Bank Piazza, a very beautiful venue, undercover. And a lot of politicians are saying, thank God we will not have to sit in that sun for the opening ceremony. Well, here is Councillor Angela Awan.
What I'll do.
Hello everyone, I'm Councillor Angela Owen, and it's with great pleasure once again that I throw my support behind India Day Fair to be held this year on the 15th of August at Suncorp Piazza at South Bank in Brisbane. This is for many years, and it is wonderful to know that it is continuing and growing from strength to strength.
So yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is wonderful to see that, she is putting her support behind that, and she has always been supporting us and supporting the India Day Fair. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now it's time to look at functions and events that are taking place here in Brisbane, and there's a lot that are happening. And of course, we are all geared up for a very, very big weekend. GoPio Gold Coast are having their annual gala dinner this weekend as well, plus many other functions happening. The Nagra Puja, which is happening at the Vishnu Maya Mandir as well. So let's take a look at all the functions and events taking place. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have time for in this segment. It's been wonderful having your company. And don't forget that today at 4 p.m. We have the Migration Ka Safar with Suman Dua. So she will be here in the studios at 4 p.m. today. Our live telecast, and of course you can ask questions. So if you have any questions related to migration, you can ask her while she is on air. So don't forget that right here, right from this station at 4 p.m. today will be the Suman Dua with Migration Ka Safar. So we'll hope to see you all there. Well, have a wonderful weekend, and of course tomorrow we will have the weekend edition, the roundup for the week that's been happening. So until then, it's goodbye from me. Have a wonderful day, but most importantly, remain safe.